The Senate chamber buzzed with an uneasy tension that morning, the heavy marble walls reverberating faintly with whispers and shifting footsteps. Marcus Valerius entered with measured dignity, his tall frame casting a shadow beneath the towering columns. His eyes, sharp and steady despite the silver threading through his dark hair, scanned the familiar chamber with a weight that had grown heavier over the months. The decay of Rome's grandeur was mirrored not only in the crumbling city but in the fracturing alliances that surrounded him. Today, the fragile web of loyalty he had hoped to maintain would begin to unravel. As Marcus took his seat, murmurs rippled through the Senate. Senators exchanged wary glances, their voices hushed yet charged with underlying hostility. The air was thick with suspicion, each faction poised to strike. At the center of the storm stood Cassius Drusus, whose rugged visage and cold, scarred eyes betrayed a ruthless ambition. Beside him, Senator Flavius, a sharp-featured man with calculating eyes, waited patiently, the architect of the day's impending betrayal. The presiding officer called the session to order, but before the formalities could begin, Flavius rose, a calculated calm in his posture that belied the venom in his voice. "Fellow senators," he began, his tone cutting through the chamber like a sharpened blade, "it has come to light that Marcus Valerius, once esteemed among us, has engaged in acts of treachery against the very empire he claims to serve." A gasp swept through the room, disbelief flickering across many faces. Marcus's own heart pounded, the accusation striking like a blow he had dreaded but not anticipated so openly. His eyes met Flavius's, searching for a shred of truth amidst the venom, but found only cold calculation. "Evidence," Flavius continued, gesturing to a folded parchment, "has been uncovered showing correspondence with enemies of Rome, communications that threaten our security and the stability of the Senate." Marcus felt the chamber tilt as whispers erupted into murmurs of outrage and shock. He opened his mouth to protest, to speak of the lies and manipulation that had ensnared him, but the weight of the moment stilled his tongue. Around him, he detected the shifting allegiances, the wary glances that once held promise of support, now turned away. From the sidelines, Cassius Drusus watched with a grim satisfaction, his plan unfolding exactly as intended. The betrayal was not merely political, it was personal. Marcus had been a bulwark of tradition, a symbol of an era slipping into shadow. To remove him was to hasten the empire's transformation, to clear the path for Cassius's vision of power. Senators loyal to Cassius moved swiftly. Guards entered the chamber, their armor gleaming under the pale light filtering through the high windows. With a curt command, they seized Marcus by the arms, the cold iron of shackles clicking round his wrists. The clang echoed ominously, a death knell for his standing and influence. The crowd parted as Marcus was led away, his gaze lingering on the faces of those he once called allies. Among them, Livia Valerius stood quietly in the gallery, her sharp dark eyes alight with a fierce resolve, though her face betrayed no hint of panic. Beneath the composed exterior burned a determination to shield her family from the ruin descending upon them. Back at their ancestral home, the news of Marcus's arrest spread swiftly. Gaius Valerius paced the dimly lit atrium, the flickering torchlight casting long shadows across his restless features. His youthful face was set with anger and urgency, the clash of ideals with his father now eclipsed by the necessity of survival. "This cannot stand," he muttered, clenching his fists. "We will not fall quietly into oblivion." Livia entered silently, her presence grounding yet charged with unspoken plans. "We must be prudent," she said softly, "but we will fight. This family will endure, no matter the cost." Lucilla, delicate and gentle, lingered nearby, her calm demeanor masking the ache of betrayal that cut deep into the family's core. "Honor is tested in darkness," she whispered, "but mercy and faith must not be abandoned." Amidst the turmoil, Marcus found himself confined within cold stone walls, his mind a tempest of reflection and regret. The empire he had dedicated his life to was crumbling, and his rigid adherence to tradition had left him vulnerable to ruthless forces. Yet even in chains, his eloquence remained unbroken, his spirit quietly defiant. Outside, the city's decay pressed in like a gathering storm. The Valerius family, fractured but unbowed, faced the daunting question: how to navigate a world where loyalty was a perilous gamble and survival demanded sacrifices that cut to the soul. The chapter closed on a note of grim uncertainty. The betrayal had shattered their world, yet from the ashes, the faint embers of resolve glimmered. The struggle for Rome's legacy and the Valerius name was only beginning, and the cost of survival would be paid in blood and broken bonds. As Marcus was led away, his final glance toward the Senate chamber bore the weight of a man who understood that the empire's twilight was not merely an end, but the crucible in which new destinies would be forged. The question hung in the air, heavy and unresolved: could honor endure when the very foundations of power were stained with betrayal? The answer would shape not only the fate of one family, but the very soul of a dying empire. The heavy iron door clanged shut behind Marcus Valerius, the echo reverberating down the cold stone corridor of the prison beneath the Senate house. The chill of the damp cell seeped through his thin tunic, and the faint flicker of a distant torch was the only light that dared to penetrate the darkness. Marcus sank onto the rough bench, his eyes adjusting to the shadows. Around him, the silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional drip of water from the cracked ceiling. He breathed deeply, the stale air filling his lungs as memories flooded his mind. The grandeur of the Senate, the vibrant pulse of Rome's political heart, now felt like a distant dream. The betrayal that had led to his downfall gnawed at him relentlessly. How had it come to this? The empire, once invincible, now crumbled beneath the weight of greed, ambition, and decay. And he, a loyal guardian of its traditions, was reduced to a prisoner in its dying days. Marcus's thoughts wandered to his family, their faces etched in his memory with a mixture of pride and pain. Livia, ever the pragmatic force behind his public composure, would be fighting battles of her own, weaving through the treacherous currents of Senate politics to shield their name. His son, Gaius, fiery and impulsive, was no doubt maneuvering in shadows of a different kind, grasping for a future beyond the old order. The cell's silence was pierced by the heavy footsteps of Tiberius. The loyal military officer approached, his battle-worn face softened by concern. Marcus looked up, offering a faint nod. "Master Valerius," Tiberius began, lowering his voice, "the family is holding strong. Livia's influence grows among the senators still loyal to us, and Gaius moves swiftly with his allies. But the storm gathers, and the walls close in." Marcus's jaw tightened. Rome's decay is not just in stone and Senate halls, Tiberius. It festers in the hearts of men. I fear the price we pay may be more than honor can bear. Outside the prison, in the shadowed corridors of power, Livia Valeria convened with a small circle of trusted senators. The air was thick with the scent of burning oil and whispered secrets. Her sharp eyes scanned the faces before her, calculating, commanding. Cassius Drusus tightens his grip, she murmured, but cracks appear. Ambition blinds even the most ruthless. We must exploit these fractures before it is too late. Her words wove a web of promises and veiled threats, a delicate dance of power that demanded both courage and cold calculation. Every alliance brokered was a gamble, every whispered word a potential dagger in the back. Yet Livia bore the weight with quiet strength, for the survival of the Valerius name depended on her resolve. In a dimly lit chamber elsewhere, Gaius Valerius leaned over a cluttered table. Maps and letters spread like battlefield plans. Julia, his childhood confidant, stood beside him, her eyes alight with fierce determination. "The barbarians are restless," Gaius said, tracing his finger along a borderline. "If we can secure their loyalty, even temporarily, it may buy us the leverage we need. But it is a dangerous path, one of betrayal and fire." Julia nodded, her voice steady. "Better to forge an uncertain future than perish clinging to a doomed past." Their whispered conspiracies carried the restless energy of youth, the desperate hope of those unwilling to surrender to fate. Yet beneath the ambition lay the fragile threads of family loyalty, strained and stretched thin by the tides of change. Back in his cell, Marcus closed his eyes, the muffled sounds of the city faint beyond the prison walls. The Empire's twilight was upon them, all a time of endings and uncertain beginnings. His heart ached with the knowledge that survival would demand sacrifices that no man could face without scars. The clash of footsteps and the distant murmur of voices reminded him that the world outside did not pause for his despair. The Valerius family, fractured but unbroken, fought on amid the ashes of their legacy. As night deepened, Marcus's thoughts crystallized into a reluctant resolve. The chains that bound him were physical, but his mind still roamed free. The future awaited, dark and uncertain, and he would face it however it came, whether as a broken sentinel of a fallen empire or the reluctant witness to its rebirth. Outside, Livia and Gaius moved through the labyrinth of power and peril, their fates intertwined with the dying heartbeat of Rome itself. The consequences of their choices would echo far beyond the prison walls, shaping the destiny of a world on the brink of transformation. And in that moment, amid chains and consequences, the Valerius family stood at the crossroads of history, caught between honor and survival, tradition and change. The shadows of the merchant's warehouse stretched long across the uneven stone floor, an uncertain sanctuary for the conspirators gathered within. Gaius Valerius stood over the rough-hewn table, his fingers tracing the worn edges of a map that depicted the shifting boundaries of Rome's faltering dominion. Beside him, Julia leaned in, her voice low and urgent, weaving plans that could save their family or doom them to ruin. "The barbarians are wary, but desperate," Julia whispered, eyes scanning the scattered parchments. "Their hunger for land is matched only by their distrust of Roman deceit. We must offer more than empty promises." Gaius nodded, his restless energy barely contained. "I will meet with their leaders tonight. This alliance is our last chance. If Rome falls, so do we all." Outside, the city murmured with the restless stirrings of decay. Distant voices, the clang of metal, and the faint scent of smoke from forgotten hearths mingled in the cool evening air. Within the warehouse, the air was thick with anticipation and the weight of impending choices. As night deepened, Gaius slipped quietly through the winding alleys beyond the city walls, the moonless sky cloaking his approach. He arrived at a clearing where a flickering fire burned, the flames casting dancing shadows upon the faces of the barbarian chieftains gathered in solemn council. Their eyes, sharp and wary, reflected the firelight as they regarded him with a mixture of suspicion and guarded hope. "You come with words, Roman," one chieftain said, his voice gravelly yet commanding. "But words have broken before. Why should we trust the son of the empire that abandoned us?" Gaius met the gaze steadily. "Because the empire I serve is dying, and I seek not to uphold its decay but to build something new. Together, we can forge a future where our families survive. The negotiations stretched into the night, fraught with tension and punctuated by moments of fragile understanding. Gaius spoke not only as a son of Rome, but as a man compelled by the instinct to survive beyond rigid tradition. Back in the city, Julia moved with quiet urgency, weaving through the labyrinthine streets to deliver news of spies and informants closing in on their plans. Her eyes, bright with resolve, reflected the danger that shadowed every step. When she found Gaius again, their whispers were laced with both fear and determination. "They know more than we hoped," she said. "We must act swiftly, or all will be lost." At dawn, as the first pale light crept over the horizon, Gaius stood alone on a ruined balcony overlooking the city he once loved with unyielding devotion. The chill wind tugged at his cloak, carrying with it the scent of ashes and uncertainty. His gaze stretched across the fractured skyline, temples crumbling, forums deserted, and the faint glow of fires still burning in distant quarters. Here, amidst the ruins of empire, a new order was poised to rise. The choices made in shadows and whispers would echo through the coming days, shaping the fate of the Valerius family and the very soul of Rome. Gaius allowed himself a moment of reflection, the turmoil inside him a mirror of the world around. The alliance forged tonight was a gamble weighted with peril, but in a time when survival demanded sacrifice, it was a risk he was willing to bear. "For family," he murmured, eyes narrowing against the cold. "For the future." The city held its breath, caught between the dying embers of the past and the uncertain dawn of what was to come. And so, as the city stirred awake in uneasy silence, the wheels of fate turned inexorably onward, setting the stage for a reckoning unlike any before. The fragile threads of loyalty, power, and survival intertwined, poised to unravel or bind anew in the ashes of empire. With the dawn, the game had changed, and there was no turning back. The heavy wooden doors of the Valerius ancestral home creaked shut behind Lucilla as she entered the atrium, her footsteps echoing faintly against the cold marble. The flickering glow of oil lanterns cast wavering shadows, the quiet crackle of flames underscoring the profound stillness that had settled over the household. Her eyes found Livia across the room, who stood composed yet distant, her sharp dark eyes reflecting a steely resolve that Lucilla could no longer abide. "Livia," Lucilla began, her voice trembling yet resolute, "how far will you go to protect this family? At what cost do we sacrifice our honor?" Livia turned slowly, her gaze unwavering. "The world we knew is gone, Lucilla. Survival demands sacrifice. If we cling to old virtues while Rome burns, we perish with it." The words hung between them like smoke, intangible yet suffocating. Lucilla's delicate features tightened with a mixture of frustration and sorrow. "But is it right to barter our souls for safety, to manipulate, deceive, even betray? These are not the ways of our ancestors." Livia's lips pressed into a thin line. "And yet here we stand still standing, because I chose the path others feared to tread. You may see it as betrayal. I see it as necessary pragmatism." The tension in the room was palpable, the faint scent of burning oil mingling with the weight of unsaid words. Lucilla's eyes glistened with unshed tears, the moral compass she clung to slipping further from reach. Meanwhile, across the house in his study, Marcus sat alone. The last light of day faded through the tall windows, casting long shadows that stretched across the ornate marble floors. His hands were clasped tightly together on his lap, knuckles white, as his mind wrestled with the unfolding betrayals, both political and personal, that threatened to unravel all he held dear. He thought of Livia's cold pragmatism, necessary yet alien to his deeply ingrained sense of honor. He thought of Gaius, his son, whose restless ambition and rebellious spirit had driven wedges between father and son. And he thought, most painfully, of Lucilla's quiet despair, a mirror of the fading values he had spent a lifetime defending. A soft knock interrupted his reverie. He looked up to see Gaius standing in the doorway, youthful energy bristling in his stance. The fading light caught the intensity in his eyes, restless and challenging. "Father," Gaius said sharply, stepping inside without invitation, "your loyalty to Rome's old ways will be our undoing. The empire dies if we do not change with it." Marcus met his son's gaze, the weight of generations between them. "Change, yes, but not at the cost of what defines us. There must be a line, Gaius. Lines are drawn by the victorious, not by the vanquished," Gaius retorted, voice rising. "We cannot survive clinging to ghosts." The argument swelled between them, voices low but fierce, until the tension spilled out into the family garden. The air was cool, the sounds of the restless city faint beneath their heated words. Neither yielding, they embodied the fracture tearing through the Valerius name. Later, the family gathered in the dining chamber. The table was set with care, but the usual warmth was absent. Candlelight flickered over strained faces, illuminating the silent accusations and unspoken fears that clouded the room. Conversations faltered, glances were avoided. The bonds that had once held them tightly now felt fragile, stretched thin by conflict and doubt. Marcus, seated at the head, observed his family with a heavy heart. The cost of their survival was no longer just the empire's decline, but the erosion of their unity and shared purpose. As the meal ended in uneasy silence, Marcus allowed himself a final thought. In a world unraveling, could loyalty endure? Could love survive the corrosive touch of necessity? The answers remained as uncertain as the twilight settling over Rome itself. The family's fractures deepened, but beneath the tension lingered a reluctant hope that from these ashes some new form of resilience might yet arise. Yet the question remained, at what price? And as the night closed in, the Valerius household stood divided, each member grappling with the shadows of their choices and the uncertain dawn to come. The first light of dawn broke over the horizon, pale and uncertain, as if hesitant to illuminate the fractured city below. From his vantage point atop a rugged hill outside Rome, Gaius Valerius gazed down upon a sprawling camp that spread like a dark stain across the land. Flickering campfires cast dancing shadows against the silhouettes of warriors preparing for the coming storm. The banners of various barbarian tribes fluttered in the cold morning breeze, their colors clashing with the ochre and green of the dying fields. The air was thick with anticipation, the low murmur of voices and the clatter of armor a grim hymn to the gathering war. Gaius's heart thudded unevenly in his chest. This was the future he had chosen, a dangerous gambit to secure the Valerius family's survival amid Rome's collapse. Behind him, the distant city remained shrouded in mist and decay, its once proud marble facades now cracked and worn, the streets echoing with the restless footsteps of uncertain citizens. Within the Senate's marble halls, Marcus Valerius sat in quiet contemplation, his fingers tapping lightly on the carved wooden armrest of his chair. Though the chamber was filled with the murmurs of senators and the rustle of heavy robes, his mind was fixed on the horizon, on the storm gathering beyond the borders that threatened to engulf all they had built. Beside him, Livia Valeria regarded him with a steady gaze, her sharp dark eyes reflecting the cold pragmatism that had become their shield. "The barbarians grow bold," she said softly, voice low but firm. Gaius's alliance has changed everything. We must prepare not just with words, but with steel and strategy. Marcus nodded slowly, the weight of his legacy pressing down upon him. The empire we knew is gone. What remains is survival, and the cost may be more than I am willing to pay. Outside the city walls, Praetor Maximus rode among the ranks of assembled legionaries. His imposing figure clad in armor dulled by dust and battle scars. His face was a map of hardship and resolve. Eyes narrowed against the rising sun's glare as he surveyed the disciplined formations that stretched like a living wall across the plain. The legions were battle-weary but unbroken, their loyalty to Rome a fragile thread amid the chaos. Maximus's voice was low and commanding as he addressed his officers. The barbarians will test us. We must hold firm. Our duty is to Rome, to its people, to the legacy we defend, no matter the cost. In a tent nearby, heavy with the scent of smoke and leather, Gaius and Julia leaned over a rough-hewn table scattered with maps and hastily scrawled notes. The flickering candlelight cast long shadows across their faces, highlighting the intensity of their whispered conversation. "The barbarians trust me," Gaius said, his voice barely above a whisper, "but their patience is thin. We must act before the Senate's divisions tear us apart." Julia's eyes glimmered with both fear and fierce determination. If this alliance breaks, all will be lost. The Valerius name, our future, everything. The tension in the tent was palpable, the weight of impending battle and uncertain loyalties pressing in like the suffocating heat of summer. Outside, the distant rumble of approaching legions echoed through the valley. The storm on the horizon no longer a metaphor but an imminent reality. Meanwhile, in the heart of Rome, the Valerius household stirred with unease. Lucilla's delicate features were drawn with worry as she moved silently through the dim corridors, her footsteps soft against the cold stone. She paused before a small altar, fingers trembling as she traced the faded symbols of forgotten gods. Prayer was a fragile solace in a world unraveling at its seams. At the same time, Tiberius, the steadfast military officer and loyal friend to Marcus, prepared to carry out the orders that the worsening situation demanded. His stocky frame and battle-worn visage concealed a mind sharp and unwavering in loyalty. He understood the precarious balance between military might and political intrigue, and the thin line on which Rome's fate now balanced. As the day progressed, the city braced itself. Rumors of the barbarian encroachment swirled through the crowded forums and darkened alleys, whispers of war and betrayal mingling with the scent of burning wood and the ever-present dust of decay. Marcus met with fellow senators, their faces etched with worry and resolve. Cassius Drusus's shadow loomed larger with each passing hour, his ruthless ambition threatening to engulf what little stability remained. Gaius's secret dealings had shifted the tides. The barbarians were no longer simply external threats. They were part of the intricate web of alliances and enmities that defined this twilight of empire. Each decision carried a price, and each alliance risked unraveling the fragile fabric holding the Valerius family and Rome itself together. As night fell, the city's lights flickered uncertainly against the encroaching darkness. Marcus stood on the balcony of the family's ancestral home, gazing out at the sprawling metropolis that once ruled the world. The wind whispered through the broken columns and shattered statues, carrying with it the scent of ash and loss. He clenched his jaw, the bitter taste of inevitability heavy on his tongue. "The storm is coming," he murmured to himself, "and we must decide where we stand before it breaks."